Hey everyone, Reid of Valor. Purpose of this video today is to talk about some articles that I've read recently, which is that concealed carriers aren't effective against criminals and shouldn't be allowed on college campuses, and I'd like to address a lot of that. Let's go ahead and get started. So one of the narratives now that's going about against firearms owners and people that should be able to carry firearms is that concealed carriers, they'll say that a lot of the studies about the effectiveness of concealed carriers are inflated, or they'll say that they're exaggerated, or they'll say a lot of different things like, oh, concealed carriers really don't shoot bad guys all that much. And what they've also tried to do is bring in various law enforcement individuals, not agencies, but individuals. And so I find this odd that people that have been in law enforcement or retired would turn against concealed carriers and say, no, you shouldn't do that. Now, I'd like to start by saying this, that if you ask most LE out there, they are pro concealed carriers. They want people out there carrying firearms. Like, it's not even close. The vast majority of them out there do and are supportive of that. Now, I find it odd that they'll find the few that are against it and then quote them in the media. So it's odd to me how they would do that. And so what we're going to focus on today is we're going to use a typical tactic of someone that would be anti-Second Amendment, anti-concealed carriers, and I'm going to use a lot, I'm going to address a lot of their talking points that they get into, specifically when it comes to things such as campus carry of firearms. Now, to begin with, this one specifically is about Arizona. I came across this article not too long ago in the Arizona Republic. I've got a link to that article in the description box if you'd like to look at it and see how the quotes are used to go against the Second Amendment and campus carry specifically. Now, what I'd like to address are a couple of points that this individual is a retired Mesa detective. His name's Bill Richardson. Email address right there. So if you'd like to share your feelings, your thoughts, or educate this man, edify him if you will, go ahead and send him some comments. I'm sure he'd appreciate that, because we're all lifelong learners and we all want to make sure that we're getting valid information. So I'd like to give a couple of points that he brings up about concealed carriers and some of the myths out there that people that are for gun control, for anti-concealed carry laws, that they're going to bring up, and I'm going to help you guys go ahead and rebut a couple of these. One of the main points that former Detective Richardson brings up is that poor marksmanship exists in law enforcement. So how much worse would it be for concealed carriers? He gives the statistic that police hit about half the time. Well, that's somewhat true, but it's also misleading. I'd like to illustrate a couple of points that if you look at the FBI data where officers are killed or wounded, the marksmanship's about 18 to 22, 23, maybe 24% on any given year. That's if they lose or get wounded. Now, if you go to other studies where they're successful, you'll look at police that do have a hit percentage about 60% of the time. If we go to specialized units, and by successful, I mean that they shoot the bad guy and don't sustain damage. So their hit percentage is about 2/3 of the time that they fire. Every 3 rounds, they'll hit 2 of them on average. Now, you go to specialized units, it's going to be higher, but I find this illustrative in that if you look at when people were not successful and then use statistics for that, people say, oh, police only hit 18 to 20% of the time. That's not true, guys. You got to stop saying stuff like that. They don't hit 1 in 5 shots nationwide. They're much more successful than that. It's certainly upwards to that 2/3 most of the time, because most police don't die when they get in gunfights. So we got to start looking at that. And then furthermore, when you go to specialized units that get more training and you look at SWAT, they are much higher hit percentages. I mean, they can be 80 to 90+%. When you look at people that actually go outside of their agency to get hits, or to when you look at police officers that go outside of their agency for training, such as commercial firearms training, those officers that go on to get into gunfights, their hit percentage is substantially higher in the mid to high 90s. So this can all be substantiated, but the illustration is here is that average police training really doesn't cut the mustard. And that's what Detective Richardson goes on to say. He says that even if highly trained people like police only hit half the time, how much worse would concealed carriers be? Well, I'd like to address that. The problem is that their hit percentage largely depends on the agency. The hit percentage largely depends on how much training that those officers actually do throughout the year. If we look at a typical law enforcement training paradigm, and how can I talk about this? Guys, I'm a former police officer. I train police officers here at Valor. They come to us outside of their agency a lot of times to get further and better training. That's why they exist. Any commercial firearms training, I shouldn't say any, A lot of the commercial firearms training that's out there is going to far exceed what police are get in their normal firearms training. The average police firearms training that they're going to shoot is 50, maybe 100 rounds a year that they're required to shoot. And I also like to illustrate this, that normal police firearms training is not designed to get them to prevail during deadly force. It's designed to get them to pass a qualification so that their city or county attorney can check off a box and say, okay, they've met the state standard for proficiency of the handgun. It's a legality issue. It is not about helping people survive during deadly force. Now, obviously, there are other agencies, departments out there that do want to go better and go beyond that, but typically what you're looking at is a budgeting issue, and you're looking at subpar training that's designed simply for a handgun qualification. So to use that, and to his point of, oh, well, police are highly trained and they only hit half the time, that's exceptionally misleading and it's dishonest. It's really not treating the topic thoroughly, and it's not treating it from an academic standpoint. And I think that goes to show you that how much you practice, how much you train directly influences your hit percentage during deadly force. So in short, police marksmanship training, by and large, is not designed to get officers to prevail during deadly force or to be accurate during deadly force. It's a legality issue. It's the minimum standard. The state standard handgun qualification for police is the minimum standard. Personally, you should be able to pass that with your eyes closed. But and many of them may do. But my point is that to use the law enforcement is the standard for shooting during deadly force. That's not accurate. That's the minimum standard. That is not what should be judged, and that is not should be the goal for people carrying firearms. And of course, then as people that are arguing for gun control, they're often contradictory. In his next point in the article, he gives several anecdotal stories, the bulk of which are over 30 years old. So in his experience that he's seen his fellow officers shoot in, one anecdote that he gives was from the 1980s. He mentions a colleague shooting 17 rounds and getting only one hit. But in this previous point, he just said that they hit 50% of the time. 17 divided by 1, I don't think that's 50%. I'm not a math guy, I'm a history guy. I'm sure you smart folks out there can figure out what that hit percentage is. And his anecdote is that he's fired 17 times, only hit once. What would have happened if this would have taken place on a college campus? I don't know. My question is, what happened in this incident? Where did those rounds go? Where did the 16 other rounds go? And in his next point, he mentions another shooting that he saw where a bullet went through a bad guy and lodged into a wall. And he mentions that a typical 9mm police service load can penetrate 18 inches. Yes, it's supposed to. 12 to 18 inches is the standard according to the FBI. If it doesn't do that, you're not going to be able to punch the vitals of the central nervous system of a bad guy in a side shot. This is well-known knowledge. So it's not like what's the other option? To use underpowered ammo? To use like wax bullets? To use airsoft? It's not workable. So obviously, if his point is that handgun bullets can penetrate 18 inches and that can go into walls, that's true, but that's also why we have to have training that addresses be sure of your target and what's beyond it. That's one of the first things we cover in every single pistol class that we teach here. Be sure of your target and what's beyond it. We're responsible for every round that we fire, but that has nothing to do with college campus carry. That has nothing to do with any basic knowledge of firearms. So he's talking as if the handgun rounds are powerful and dangerous. They're dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. They're dangerous if you just recklessly fire rounds. And they're dangerous if you're not sure of your target and what's beyond it, of course. His next point is that for most concealed carry permits that you don't have to do any training at all. You just go in a classroom, and then a lot of them you don't even have to qualify. Well, that's true in many states. Well, in 27 states as of this video, they're a permitless carry, which means that you don't have to go to a government class, you don't have to pay any money, you just exercise your right to the Second Amendment. So that's true. But let's also pretend like law enforcement training isn't that great either. It's not that much of an upgrade, if you will. If we look at military handgun training, unless you're special operations, like you're not going to get that great of handgun training in the military. How do I know this? I carried a handgun for 2 years while I was in the Marine Corps. Okay, I understand the training programs, and not only law enforcement but also the military. They're not that great. Commercial firearms training is going to far be above any of that stuff. So when he says concealed carry classes are not that great, okay, I'll agree with you depending on the instructor. But what that also shows you is that he assumes that all concealed carriers just stop at getting their permit. He assumes that all concealed carriers just stop. Oh, I've got my piece of paper, I'm a certified badass. That's not what happens. A lot of people seek further training besides their concealed carry permit. And just because of the lazy attitude of a lot of law enforcement out there, oh, I'm a certified cop, oh, I passed my qualification, I'm not going to touch my gun for the rest of the year. And I've known them. I know there's guys out there like that, but that doesn't mean that everybody's like that. To assume the lowest person on the lowest standard is going to be that average concealed carrier, that's absolutely wrong. That's completely incorrect. And what I always like to think about people as people carry firearms, they want to go out, they want to get better, they want to make right decisions. Who the hell wants to go to jail or prison? You know, who wants to misshoot somebody, right? Nobody. So people a lot of times will go out and seek further training. So I love his mentality that, oh, you don't even need any training for a lot of concealed carry permit. That's fine, but a lot of people go out and seek training past their concealed carry class. Another point he brings up in the article is that a concealed carry permit can be misidentified by police as the bad guy. Well, first of all, the responsibility for pointing your firearm at somebody, that's an individual responsibility. And he goes on to give an anecdote about him being undercover and how he had several guns pointed at him on multiple occasions by other law enforcement, and that had he not made the right decision, he may have been shot, or he would have been shot. Well, once again, the individual responsibility to discriminate targets is on the individual. You doing something like that is just a ridiculous argument. Oh, I could be shot by a police if I have a concealed carry. It's the police officer's job to discriminate the target. It's the individual's responsibility to discriminate the target. And by the way, never point your muzzle at anything you don't intend to destroy. So that means that you have to identify the threat based on their behavior, then you make the decision to point your firearm and shoot them. And that's the only reason to point a firearm at somebody, is when you've decided to shoot them. I do not want to hear any more tactics or techniques about people pointing firearms at people to get compliance, or pointing firearms at people just because you're scared. If your tactics involve you pointing a firearm at somebody before you've decided to shoot them, then your tactics are wrong. And I'll take the challenge against anybody out there on arguing that. We can't just give mention to the firearms handling rules and say, never point your weapon at anything you don't intend to destroy, and then not do it in our training and our practice. That's irresponsible. So his point about police pointing firearms potentially at concealed carriers, that is a training issue. That is a major gap in the wire. That is a major problem when it comes to training. That is an issue with that department's training policy, not with the concealed carrier. I know of many states who are changing their policy on muzzle and suspect compliance and muzzle ready positions because of that very fact. I know for a fact that Georgia is going to a position like that when it comes to muzzle control and when it comes to training and tactics. So outstanding, good work on there. And that's certainly one of the modules that we go into in our pistol classes. In every single class we teach here for pistol, we teach target discrimination, muzzle control, making a decision before you decide to point your muzzle at somebody in order to shoot them. We cover that very extensively, so training needs to address that issue. And that's one of those issues that you can't use and say, oh, I better make the right decision or somebody's going to shoot me. No, that's on that individual's decision. So just because somebody has a lack of training and a lack of muzzle discipline, that is not an excuse to deprive somebody of their right to carry and protect themselves, even when they're going to school. And of course, his last statement is this: carrying a gun is no guarantee of safety. Well, I can also tell you this, that not carrying a gun is certainly no guarantee of safety. And when you look at the problem that he mentions there, his only alternative is don't carry your gun when you go to school. Forfeit your Second Amendment right when you go to higher education, where you're supposed to be learning about these kind of rights. And that's such a counterintuitive, defeatist statement to say, oh, I'll just disarm myself because there's no guarantee of safety. Well, geez, let me ask you guys out there. Do you think carrying a firearm gives you more or less options in the event that your life or the life of innocent bystanders is threatened? Do you think a firearm gives you more or less options when you have multiple attackers? Do you think a firearm gives you more or less options when you're severely wounded? Do you think a firearm gives you more or less options when you are severely threatened, when somebody takes a family member hostage, when somebody tries to kidnap somebody, when somebody's beating somebody to death? Do you think a firearm gives you more or less options? I agree, a firearm is no guarantee of safety, but it sure as hell increases your chances for a successful outcome over just saying, oh, I'll just leave it in my car. Oh, I'll just leave it at home, because it's no guarantee of safety. And reverting to his point about this, about police misidentifying people and potentially shooting a concealed carry holder, I would like to illustrate this absolute fact. Concealed carry holders misshoot less than police do. Concealed carriers misshoot and have a wrongful shoot at a lesser percentage than law enforcement. And this was illustrated with Maryland's Attorney General a few years ago. He was vehemently against people carrying concealed. And when he actually looked at the data, he had to come to the conclusion that, you know what? They're right. Concealed carriers do misshoot less than police officers. I have to change my position. And at least he was honest about that in a court. At least he was honest about that at the hearing where he finally made his decision. Hey, this is a good idea for people to carry firearms, because he looked at the evidence. He looked at the data. So this whole idea that concealed carriers are going to misshoot or police are going to shoot a concealed carrier, it's in the favor of the concealed carrier, because we make better decisions a lot of times than police do with proper training. So the whole premise of Richardson's argument is that people are going to make bad decisions and miss. That's his world. Or that they aren't going to seek further training past their concealed carry permit. So his world is less than mediocrity. His world is check in the box people. And that would make sense for a lifelong government servant, right? Like that would make sense for somebody who's worked in government, because you always heard the phrase, it's good enough for government work, right? So that would make sense for somebody that just does the minimum standard to get by. Now, in our world, people that look for excellence, people that look to be far than above average, people that look to gain mastery over these things, then we continue to go out and learn. We're lifelong learners. We go out there. We want to be as good as possible on the day we need to be as good as possible. We need to be the best that we can be on the worst day of our life. And most concealed carriers understand that. A lot of people understand that. The students that come here and train with us understand that. They want to be the best on the worst day of their life. They want to be able to prevail and make good decisions. And that's why they seek outside training. That's why the police officers that come here and train with us, they want to be the best professional that they can be. That's why people in the military come here and train with us, because they know that their training does not address a lot of the things that we learn here. So commercial firearms training, depending on where you're at, is going to give you a serious edge. It's going to help you in these. It's going to put arguments like Richardson makes to bed. It's going to eliminate a lot of the stupidity that you hear out there. And I think it's very important that we understand mediocrity doesn't work in any aspect of life. And if your world is everything can go wrong, everything will go wrong, Murphy's Law, if that's your mentality, keep it. If that's not your mentality, if you're somebody out there who believes that you can train to a higher standard, if you're somebody out there that knows for a fact that you can be excellent, that you can prevail, and that you can achieve a standard of mastery, then come on out to Valor Ridge and we can help you along that path. If you found the information in the video helpful, subscribe to the channel, follow me on social media. That link is down below. And if you really want to be a practitioner of your pistol or your rifle, if you want to be good and you want to be the best on that worst day of your life, come on out and see us and we'll help you in every way that we can. This is Reid Henrichs of Valor Ridge reminding you the lessons that we learn are written on the tombstones of others. We'll see you on the ridge.